This cabin sits on HOA land. Unload your truck and leave before security removes you. That was the first thing Vanessa Caldwell said to me, less than an hour after I moved into my grandfather's cabin. She stood in the middle of my gravel driveway, with two security guards behind her, holding a thick blue HOA binder like it was a court order. One guard photographed my license plate. The other fastened a red violation notice to my gate. According to Vanessa, I was an unauthorized occupant. My old Ford was a visual blight. My tools violated community standards. And the 11 wooded acres surrounding the cabin belonged to Pine Hollow Estates. Then she pointed toward the road and told security to escort me out if I refused to leave. What she didn't know was that the deed inside my truck didn't cover only the cabin. It also covered the land beneath Pine Hollow's clubhouse, entrance gate, private road, and water station. The HOA didn't own that land. They had been leasing it from my family for 29 years, so I didn't argue. I photographed the notice, recorded the guards, and opened the master ground lease. At the next HOA meeting, Vanessa's own attorney would ask the question that silenced the entire room. Why are we paying this man rent? Vanessa didn't introduce herself until after she had ordered me off the property. Vanessa Caldwell, she said, tapping the gold badge clipped to her coat. President of the Pine Hollow Estates Association. I looked past her toward the black SUV blocking my driveway. I'm Daniel Mercer, I said, and this is my cabin. She gave me the kind of smile people use when they believe the conversation is already over. You may have paperwork for the structure, she said, but the land falls under HOA jurisdiction. Then she opened her binder and pulled out a glossy color map. Every road, home, and recreation area inside Pine Hollow had been shaded green. So had my cabin and the woods behind it. At first glance, it looked official. But I had spent 32 years working around utility surveys, easements, and recorded property lines. Legal maps carried parcel numbers, survey bearings, county stamps, and recording references. Vanessa's map had none of them. It was a sales brochure. I pointed to the empty corner. Where's the recording number? Her expression tightened. The board has already verified ownership. Then show me the deed. One of the security guards stepped closer, but Vanessa raised her hand. You have until tomorrow morning to leave voluntarily, she said. After that, we begin enforcement. She returned the map to her binder and walked back toward the SUV. That was when I noticed something orange tied to a tree beside the cabin. A fresh survey flag. Someone had been measuring my land before I ever arrived. The cabin wasn't much to look at from the road. It had 2 rooms, a stone chimney, a sagging porch, and cedar siding darkened by more than 50 years of weather. To Vanessa, it probably looked like an eyesore standing between her HOA and a cleaner view. To me, it was the last place that still felt like family. My grandfather, Harold Mercer, had built it in 1968, using timber cut from the property. He taught me how to repair fence posts, identify iron survey pins, and never trust a boundary someone couldn't prove on paper. After my wife died, I sold our house in the city and came back here. I planned to finish the repairs my father had never gotten around to and spend my retirement somewhere that still held good memories. Inside, almost everything was where my grandfather had left it. His workbench sat beneath the front window. Old county maps were rolled inside a wooden rack. A steel cabinet stood in the corner, locked beneath years of dust. I had planned to open it after unloading the truck. Instead, I walked the tree line. The old iron survey pins were still in place, exactly where I remembered them. Together, they enclosed the cabin, the driveway, and 11 acres of woods. That orange flag Vanessa's people had placed beside the cabin wasn't marking an old boundary. It was marking a new one they intended to invent. The next morning, I found a white envelope nailed to the porch post. Across the front, in red capital letters, it read, "Final Notice of Non-Compliance." Inside were 6 violations: unauthorized occupancy, unapproved vehicle storage, exterior tools visible from the road, visual blight, obstruction of emergency access, and failure to submit the cabin for architectural review. The fine was $500 a day. I called the number printed at the bottom. Vanessa answered on the second ring. "You received the notice," she said. "I received a list of rules from an association I never joined." "You don't have to join," she replied. "The property is already under our jurisdiction." I looked through the front window at the iron survey pin beside the driveway. "Send me the recorded declaration that includes this parcel." There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. "You may own the cabin, Mr. Mercer. You do not own the land beneath it." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. Either Vanessa had never checked the county records, or she was counting on me not to. I didn't argue. I placed the notice in a folder, wrote down the time of the call, and emailed her a simple request. I asked for the deed, recorded plat, and governing document she claimed gave Pine Hollow authority over my land. Her answer arrived 20 minutes later. No deed, no survey, no recorded declaration. Only one sentence. The board has already authorized removal of the unauthorized structure. They weren't trying to fine me into compliance. They were preparing to tear down my grandfather's cabin. I left for town just after noon to buy roofing felt and a new porch light. When I returned, a black Pine Hollow security vehicle was parked across my driveway. The chain on my gate had been cut. In its place hung a brass padlock and a white metal sign. HOA property. No trespassing. A security guard stepped out before I could open my truck door. "You've been ordered off the premises." "I live here." "Not according to the board." I took out my phone and started recording. A second vehicle pulled in behind me. Vanessa climbed out, already holding her phone to her ear. "He's back," she said loudly. "Yes, the trespasser." 10 minutes later, Deputy Rachel Ortiz arrived. Vanessa rushed to meet her and claimed I had threatened security, damaged HOA property, and attempted to force my way onto community land. Then she handed over the same glossy map. Deputy Ortiz studied it before looking at me. "Do you have ownership documents?" "The certified copies are inside the cabin they locked me out of," I said. "But check county parcel 1844207. Vanessa folded her arms. "County records are outdated." Ortiz entered the number into her patrol computer. A few seconds later, her expression changed. "Daniel Mercer," she read. "Current taxpayer and recorded owner." Vanessa immediately called it a filing error. Ortiz didn't arrest anyone. Instead, she ordered security to remove the lock until ownership could be verified. Before leaving, she lowered her voice. "You may want to search the other parcels connected to that name." That night, I finally opened my grandfather's steel cabinet. The key was still taped beneath his workbench. Inside were 4 thick folders, each labeled in his block handwriting. Deeds, surveys, leases, payments. I opened the deed first. The cabin, driveway, and 11 wooded acres were listed under my name, transferred after my father's death. There was no HOA declaration attached to the parcel, no covenant, no community restriction. Then I unrolled the original survey. The black boundary line followed the iron pins that still stood outside. Vanessa's green marketing map had moved that line nearly 200 feet. But the third folder changed everything. It contained a recorded master ground lease signed 29 years earlier between my grandfather and the developer who built Pine Hollow Estates. The HOA owned its houses and structures. It did not own the land beneath several of its most important facilities. The entrance road, clubhouse, mail pavilion, recreation field, and water pump station all sat on Mercer property under a renewable lease. My cabin parcel was marked separately in bold. Excluded owner land, no association jurisdiction or access rights. The final folder contained annual rent statements. Pine Hollow had sent a payment every year. The most recent transfer had cleared 3 months earlier, directly into the trust account, now registered in my name. Vanessa had called me a trespasser while her entire association was paying me to use my land. But one question still bothered me. If the HOA treasurer knew those payments existed, why was Vanessa willing to risk a demolition order? The answer appeared outside my window the next morning. 3 contractors were placing new orange flags around the cabin. They had measuring wheels and a rolled set of blueprints. I walked outside and asked who had authorized the survey. The foreman looked surprised to see me. We were told this parcel was vacant. He hesitated, then handed me a single-page concept plan. Across the top were the words, Pine Hollow Retreat, 6 luxury guest cottages. My cabin appeared as a gray rectangle near the center. Beside it, in red letters, someone had written, Existing derelict structure, to be removed. The new cottages would overlook the woods and connect directly to the clubhouse. The projected cost was nearly $2 million. At the bottom of the plan was the contractor's name, Caldwell Development Services, Vanessa's last name. I checked the state business registry on my phone. The company belonged to her younger brother, Eric Caldwell. That was why she needed my cabin gone. This wasn't about community standards or emergency access. Vanessa wanted the HOA to pay her brother to build a private resort on land neither of them owned. The foreman began gathering the plans. Did the owner approve this? I asked. We were given a signed authorization last month. I looked at him. I'm the owner. He stopped moving. I photographed every page before he left. Then I called the county building department and requested the complete permit file. By that afternoon, it arrived in my email. The signature authorizing demolition had my name on it. But I had never signed it. The permit file contained more than a forged signature. The owner authorization claimed I had approved the demolition and transferred temporary construction access to Caldwell Development Services. A second document described the property as abandoned. A third stated that the owner could not be located. Vanessa had filed all 3 weeks before I moved in. That meant she knew someone still owned the parcel. She simply expected that person never to appear. I enlarged the signature at the bottom of the authorization. Whoever copied my name had taken it from an old county tax form. The letters looked close, but the middle initial was wrong. The date was also written in handwriting that wasn't mine. I called Deputy Ortiz and forwarded the permit file. Then I contacted the county recorder and requested certified copies of every document connected to the cabin parcel. Finally, I checked the HOA's public meeting notices. An emergency session had been scheduled for Friday evening, less than 48 hours away. The agenda contained 2 items: immediate removal of unsafe structure, approval of Pine Hollow Retreat construction contract. They planned to vote on demolishing my cabin and award the construction contract to Vanessa's brother during the same meeting. I could have confronted her immediately. Instead, I sent one email. Please confirm that Pine Hollow claims ownership of my cabin parcel and has legal authority to demolish the structure. Vanessa replied 12 minutes later. The board's ownership and authority are absolute. I printed the email and placed it beside the forged signature. Then I started preparing for Friday. By Thursday night, my dining table had disappeared beneath stacks of paper. I arranged everything in order. The certified deed, the recorded master lease, the original survey, 29 years of rent payments, photos of the cut lock, the permit application carrying my forged signature, and Vanessa's email claiming the board's authority was absolute. Deputy Ortiz helped me obtain the body cam footage from the driveway. It captured Vanessa calling me a trespasser, admitting security had changed the lock, and insisting she had personally verified ownership. My attorney, Laura Kim, reviewed the lease and pointed to a clause I had missed. If Pine Hollow attempted to occupy or develop land outside its leased parcels, the landlord could issue a formal default notice affecting the clubhouse and entrance road. I had the power to make Pine Hollow's problem much larger, but hundreds of families used that road. They hadn't forged my name. They hadn't tried to destroy the cabin. Vanessa had. So I decided not to threaten the community. I would let her make her case first. Friday afternoon, I placed the documents inside my grandfather's old metal file box and drove to the community center. Vanessa was already standing at the front of the room beside a projector screen. Behind her was a polished rendering of 6 luxury cottages. My cabin had been erased from the picture. Every chair in the community center was occupied. Vanessa had invited homeowners, board members, the HOA attorney, and representatives from Caldwell Development Services. Her brother Eric sat in the front row with a contract folder resting on his knees. I took a seat near the back and placed my grandfather's metal file box beneath my chair. Vanessa began with photographs of my truck, my tools, and the lumber stacked beside the cabin. She called the property unsafe. She called me an unauthorized occupant. Then she displayed the glossy green map and told the room I was exploiting an old county filing error to block a project that would increase everyone's property values. The structure has no legitimate place in Pine Hollow, she said. Mr. Mercer has no ownership interest anywhere inside this community. Several residents turned to look at me. Vanessa continued. The board would first vote to authorize emergency demolition. Immediately afterward, it would approve the construction contract for the 6 guest cottages. The HOA attorney leaned toward her and quietly asked whether ownership had been independently verified. Vanessa answered into the microphone. Multiple times. The secretary called the demolition motion. Before anyone could vote, I stood. Vanessa gave me a tired smile. You'll have 2 minutes during public comment. I only need one question, I said. I lifted the metal file box onto the table. Before this board demolishes my cabin, would your attorney like to verify who owns the land beneath this building? The room went silent. Vanessa's smile disappeared. She recovered quickly. This building is HOA property, she said. Whatever document Mr. Mercer brought is irrelevant. I opened the file box and handed the first document to the association's attorney. It was the certified warranty deed. He checked the county seal, the recording number, and the legal description. This deed lists Daniel Mercer as the owner of the cabin parcel, he said. Vanessa shook her head. The cabin may be his. The land is still governed by Pine Hollow. I placed the original survey beside the deed and unfolded a larger copy across the front table. The black boundary line surrounded the cabin, driveway, and 11 wooded acres. In the lower corner, the parcel was labeled Excluded Owner Land, No Association Jurisdiction. The attorney read the language twice. Vanessa pointed at the green map on the projector. Our community plan shows otherwise. That's a sales map, I said. This is the recorded survey. Then I handed him the master ground lease. The room grew quiet as he read the first page, and then the property schedule attached behind it. The entrance road, the clubhouse parcel, the recreation field, the mail pavilion, the water pump station. Each one was listed as Mercer land leased to Pine Hollow for limited community use. The treasurer leaned forward. Wait, she said. Is this connected to the annual land payment? I placed the most recent rent statement on the table. The account showed a transfer from Pine Hollow Estates to the Mercer Family Land Trust 3 months earlier. The attorney looked directly at Vanessa. Why has this association been paying the Mercer Trust ground rent for 29 years? She didn't answer. He turned toward me. Mr. Mercer, are you now the legal beneficiary and landlord under this lease? Yes. A murmur moved through the room. One resident pointed toward the floor. You mean the HOA doesn't own this community center? The structure belongs to the association, I said. The land beneath it does not. Vanessa gripped the edge of the podium. This changes nothing. We still have authority inside Pine Hollow. Not over my cabin, I said, and not beyond the property your lease allows you to use. I looked down at the survey, then toward the room full of homeowners. You tried to remove me from land I own while standing inside a clubhouse built on land you rent from me. No one spoke. The demolition motion was still glowing on the screen behind Vanessa, but no board member was willing to second it. Vanessa stepped away from the podium. The lease expired years ago, she said, and Mr. Mercer already approved the project. I removed the forged authorization from the file box and handed it to the attorney. Then perhaps you can explain this. He compared the signature to the certified deed. The middle initial was wrong. The authorization claimed I had signed it 6 weeks earlier, approving demolition and giving Caldwell Development Services access to the parcel. I've never seen this document, I said, and I never gave anyone permission to sign my name. Eric Caldwell stood and began closing his contract folder. Vanessa pointed toward him. The contractor handled the permits. I had nothing to do with that. I placed the state business record beside the forged form. Caldwell Development Services was owned by her brother. Then I displayed Vanessa's email to the building department, requesting expedited approval before the board had even voted. The room erupted. Several residents demanded to know why the family connection had never been disclosed. Vanessa tried to speak over them. This is being taken out of context. The back doors opened. Deputy Ortiz entered with a county investigator. Ortiz placed a tablet on the table and played the body cam footage from my driveway. Vanessa's own voice filled the room, claiming she had personally verified ownership and ordering security to keep me off the property. The investigator collected the forged authorization and the permit file. The HOA attorney leaned toward the board. My advice is to suspend all votes, preserve every record, and remove Ms. Caldwell's access to association accounts immediately. This time, the board moved quickly. Vanessa was suspended as president by a unanimous vote. The guest cottage contract was canceled. The county issued a stop work order. Security was instructed to return my lock and remove every HOA sign from my land. As Vanessa walked toward the exit, she had to pass the survey spread across the table. Her clubhouse, her gate, and her entire project were outlined in black. All of them were sitting on land she had tried to steal from her landlord. I could have issued a default notice the next morning. Under the master lease, Pine Hollow's attempt to occupy land outside its legal boundaries gave me the right to challenge its access to the clubhouse, water station, and entrance road. But Vanessa had made those decisions. The families living behind the gate had not. So instead of shutting anything down, I gave the board 3 conditions. They would commission an independent financial audit. They would publish every contract, lease, and property boundary affecting the community. And they would adopt a rule forbidding the HOA from claiming authority over land that was not included in its recorded declaration. The board agreed. Over the next several months, the county investigated the forged authorization and Vanessa's undisclosed connection to her brother's company. Pine Hollow reimbursed me for the damaged lock, my legal expenses, and the repairs caused by security entering the property. A new board was elected. The glossy green map disappeared from the community center. In its place hung a certified parcel map showing exactly what the HOA owned, what it leased, and what remained private property. I spent the fall repairing my grandfather's cabin. When the porch was finished, I mounted a new cedar sign beside the driveway. Mercerland, private property. Down at Pine Hollow's entrance, the board installed another sign. Community access provided by recorded lease. Vanessa had believed a title, a binder, and a room full of frightened people made her the owner. My grandfather had taught me differently. Authority can be claimed. Property can be shaded green on a brochure, but ownership has a recording number. And before you try to throw a man off his land, you should probably check whether you're already paying him rent. What would you have done in my place? Would you have kept the lease active for the residents, or would you have issued the default notice and forced the HOA to renegotiate everything? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, property manager, or neighbor who acted like they owned land that wasn't theirs, share what happened. Because sometimes the loudest person in the room has nothing but a title, and the quiet person they underestimated has the deed.